Don't any of you have the guts to play for blood?
I'm your huckleberry. That's just my game.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope everybody's having a wonderful day. I'm your host, Derek Lambert from MythVision, but we have Christspiracy over here today. Kameron Waters, man, welcome. Welcome to MythVision, brother.
Thank you, brother. So excited to be. We've been talking about this for a long time, and I couldn't think of a better way to have this conversation than framed in this red heifer moment. So really excited to get into it.
We're definitely going to have to. I have to let everyone know, first up front, we will be plugging this throughout, I imagine, but especially by the end. If you're here early birds get the worm. So look, Christspiracy, and you know it's funny, Buddha has a story about a worm where he was going to be the king and he saw birds. There's one story that actually says that a bird came down after the plowshare ended up having a worm exposed from the earth, and the bird came and ate it. And his heart at that moment was like, that's not good. Like he felt like it's like nature itself kind of expressed to him. There's a trauma, right? Within the cycle of nature and the world we live in. And in one of the examples that kind of set him forward, I imagine there were several examples and I don't remember the story throughout the whole thing, but anyway, early birds get the worm. So Christspiracy, if you haven't watched it, you really need to go check this out. Link is in the description. Also, make sure you go subscribe to my boy's YouTube channel here. He's doing a lot of interesting work. We're cross-platforming this, and I'm hoping to see people jump over and subscribe to his YouTube channel. So did I pin that? I thought I pinned that. Either way. So look, we need to discuss the elephant in the room first off. That is this red heifer. And when you wrote me and you're like, yeah, the red heifer was sacrificed in Israel, immediately came to mind. I'm like, I remember Josephus documents this. I know in the Torah, you can find this with Moses. There's a tradition where they even spill the blood on the people. Like it's some gory stuff, right? I'm thinking you're talking like that. And then you're like, no, dude, I'm talking today in Israel. I got news that they actually are practicing sacrificing. Is it a gray-haired heifer that has red? It's not perfectly non-blemished. Help me understand.
Right. So you nailed the story pretty much. There's a lot of debate around it, obviously, because you've got, I think the wider, let's call it Christian consensus would be that, hey, if we go through with this, it's a pathway to the Antichrist, third temple, that whole thing. But then you've got evangelical, America, basically, which really wants to support this thing happening because they want to expedite that eschatology, right? They really want to get there. So it's one of those things that's come up year after year. Our good friend Dr. Tabor, he's told me, he's like, man, I've seen this story come and go. I know Ross Nichols, he's followed it as well. He's got someone on the ground there apparently that he kind of keeps tabs here and there with what's going on. But I feel like this particular instance of this is a little bit different than say like the 90s and everything, because of the level at which they're taking it seriously and the amount of funding behind it. They have this whole Temple Institute in Israel and everything that's really trying to build the altar, on the Mount of Olives, and all of these aspects coming together to the point where the red heifers are all in Shiloh right now. They've built like almost like a zoo type thing where you can go and they do conferences with a big window where you can like gaze at the heifers while they're talking about the eschatology of what's to come. And so all of that set up. And it's still one of those things that when you bring it up, people are like, come on, man, that sounds crazy and fringe. There's no way this is going to happen, right? And then I get a text message last night that they just burned one of them. Now, like you said, what's happened is one of them is defected. So it does have probably a gray hair, brown hair, something like that. And just that one hair can void it, right? But then there's the interesting idea that I guess even though God has somehow voided this heifer, they still burnt it to practice is what it seems to be. So they have a priesthood that they've been training, right, for years and years. And there's so many wild things about the priesthood that has to slaughter this heifer and spread the ashes and everything. They're supposedly, the priest can't touch anything dead, right? So they have them on elevated platforms so they're not on the ground and all of this stuff. But they apparently have a priesthood of priests over 18 that are prepared to do the whole thing. So that's what I think happened, is these priests were involved with some kind of practice ceremony where they burned one of the defected heifers.
Okay, so I'm taking your word, right? Because I don't know. And then I asked you too before, just so our viewer knows, where did you hear this and how can they check if they want to find out if there's anything valid to this?
Right. It's Israel National News shared it. So you could Google Israel National News, red heifer. They just posted about it in the last like 24 hours. A friend of mine on the ground in Israel is the one who sent me, because he's always staying on top of it and sending me this, because we followed this story in Christspiracy. And this is a massive development if this is the case. So he's constantly kind of keeping tabs on what's going on there. He sent this over to me. I said, hey, bro, can we confirm this actually happened? He replied to me just before his nighttime Israel time. And he says, bro, everywhere I'm looking, there's nothing that's confirming that it didn't happen. It looks like this happened. I don't have any it's hard to get the details though. So there's another private investigator that I've messaged who he'll know for sure. And he messaged me back and he said, it looks like it happened. But he said, it's the middle of the night. Please don't text me right now. So I messaged him this morning before our stream, and he just couldn't give me much because it's the middle of the night. But he confirmed this guy, his name's Aviv Tatarsky. He's probably got one of the best videos on YouTube about the corruption behind the red heifer. He did a piece for the name of the news organization is gonna lose me right now, but his name's Aviv Tatarsky. So maybe if you Googled it, I'll try to find it and send it in a minute.
Yeah, no worries.
But he's an investigative journalist on the ground in Israel. He's done an extensive piece. Now, if you watch the piece I'm talking about, it is in Hebrew, but it's got subtitles. But man, he really goes deep to show involvement with the Knesset and the ways that they utilize certain, I guess, loopholes to get the red heifers over with guidance from the government and everything. So many people will posit that this is just a totally fringe thing with the Temple Institute and that they're this small organization, but they're missing the point that they have real political power, just like American evangelicals who are into this have real political power. So I think the last time that I heard, there was somewhere between 30 to 46% support in Israel for the third temple, which means support for this, because this has to happen for that to happen. So
wow. Oh, more and more crazy. Honestly, it's unfortunate. I was just watching your documentary for the viewers who don't know, again, YouTube channel, but Christspiracy, and it reminded me of a documentary I saw a while back that made me feel bad about what we're doing to animals. And I can't remember the name of it, but it tugged every root of my heart, and it made me feel like, okay, what the heck are we doing in these slaughterhouses and the mass killing and things like that with animals? And I loved what was interesting about this video is how you spun it into religion. You spun this into really specifically Judeo-Christian Islamic religions, and how fundamentally in all of the literature, you do find animal sacrifices, you find sacrifice. However, what you do that's unique, and I think is something that I've heard Dr. Tabor, James Tabor, for those who don't know, Ross Nichols, I think, hints at this, but you guys are really pushing this, is so you're arguing that actually Jesus was not a fan at all of sacrificing these animals. He was anti-temple in the sense that anti this priesthood sacrificing of animals. And people are going to have to watch the documentary to get a full skinny on this. But I kind of wanted to dive into that with you a little bit, if that's cool, into this material, because I think anyone and everyone watching, we're not practicing that anymore. And when you watch it, it's pretty vivid and graphic to kind of see these things happen, even when it's just to produce mass meat production for us to eat. It's rough stuff. Why would anyone want that to be central to a religious idea? You know what I mean? Kind of ancient blood magic stuff. You know what I mean?
Totally. And where I would start with what you just said is actually by starting at the very beginning of our film, Christspiracy. You might not have caught it because it's really fast, but at the opening, we have a quote from Henry David Thoreau, the great writer in America, up in, Walden Pond, the whole thing. And he has this quote that we open the film where he says, "There are thousands hacking at the branches of evil to one hacking at the root."
Right.
The reason we open with that quote is because it really sums up what I believe after 15 years of research on this, that though there are so many amazing people in the world trying to solve the issues that face humanity and doing great work, there's this massive root cause issue underneath all of it. Let's call it the root of all evil. Some will say it's money, and that's where you get this whole, in the Jesus story, den of thieves, the money changers, whatever. But they forget and they miss, or it's been obfuscated or suppressed, that there's a much deeper root cause issue that can be proven scripturally, historically, anthropologically, biologically, whatever the discipline. You can draw a thread back to this systemic ritual blood slaughter system that underpins our religious traditions, but also underpins our society, even to this day. And though it's out of the religious systems for the most part, albeit we show Hinduism and Islam and some of the other traditions have these factions that slaughter a lot of animals and sacrifice still. For the most part, it seems it's of yesteryear, right? But it's still being perpetuated today by a now secularized and even more exponentially horrific system, which is factory farming, because 90 billion land animals are killed every year, 99% of them in factory farms. And what's more ritualistic than 3 meals a day? So
Right.
we pretend like it's not connected, but it is. And that's what Christspiracy really dives into. What are the implications of that? And I'm glad you liked it. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Yeah. So there's so much we can cover. And I just have to say, Derek, I'm so excited to have this discussion with you in particular, because
Thank you.
I watch your channel all the time, and I love the attention to detail with the source material. I love the passion. I love your background and the fact that you took the same leap that I did in questioning the worldview that you were brought up in. We maybe have landed in a little bit different places, or maybe not. Maybe we'll see that we have all kinds of agreement. But on this issue, I think that discussing it with you is going to bring a whole new. I find myself when I'm talking to people that they can't hang with the source material most of the time because it can get so heady and whatever. So if we get there today, I'm going to be excited because I want you to push back. I want you to ask all the questions and really see what I've been looking at, where I'm just sitting here going like, guys, is anyone else seeing what I'm seeing? And I'm telling you, it's not just me. As you know, Dr. Tabor, Ross Nichols, as you mentioned, I have a group chat of, Nazarenes, as we say, or EBO bros, or what, Ebionites, that are all together that we discuss this stuff. It's my buddy Aaron Abke and James Benefico on the Jesus Way podcast. This fellow Chris Artane, who has an Ebionite church on YouTube. My buddy Chris Crutchfield, 6-7 podcast. I mean, there's a lot of people. Connor of Old World, Florida. Have you guys ever done something together?
No.
You should check him out too.
Okay.
And then my buddy Scott, who's got a Nazarene church. Literally, he's founded his own thing, and he does lectures. It's something that I really see over time. This is going to pick up more and more steam as people realize how adequate and vital and true a lot of this source material is, that there's this pre-orthodoxy movement post Jesus or Yeshua, whose specific aim or mission was very much centered around rejecting this temple system, the bloodshed and all of that. And it's a continuation from the prophets and the materials before. So
I was literally going to jump off with this question, that because you and Aaron did a debate recently with other Christians who are from the more Orthodox system. And I want you to maybe comment on this, your experience here, but tell us, what is the beef? What is the issue? Because I think you and me will find common ground because we already have a shared system of observations about Bible. Okay. And that is, it's not one author speaking one voice. It's not monolithic. We're willing to say, no, that right there is some other tradition. And this tradition within this thread of Bible is competing with this other tradition, specifically sacrificial animals, blood atonement, this kind of material. And anyway, I wanted to give you the opportunity to tell us what was the experience with that debate. Who did you debate? And let's get into some of this, and then we'll weave into the weeds of material, primary sources, some ideas that we could float around.
Yeah. Well, I love that you said, what's the beef? Because pun intended. But no, it's that. So Aaron, the backstory on that is Wesley Huff and Aaron Abke had a back and forth going, where Wesley had done some reaction videos initiated by Wes, where he was debunking some of Aaron's claims. And at the same time that was happening, unbeknownst to me, I have a friend of mine who was in contact with Wes and was challenging me on some of my points in Christspiracy. And I noticed that when he was rebuttaling back to me, it was very formal in a way that I was like, bro, did you write this? And then he's like, no, it's this guy, Wesley Huff. And so they were in contact. So then I messaged my buddy Aaron and I'm like, yo, I just found out about this dude. Have you ever seen him? And also he's like ragging on you. And I had just met Aaron like 2 or 3 weeks before that, because I did a screening in Austin of Christspiracy at University of Austin. I think that's what it's called.
Wow.
I did a screening there, and James Benefico, who is also on the Jesus Way podcast with Aaron, came and brought Aaron. And so we met. So we had just started discussions. The synchronicity was nuts. So
yeah.
We realized we had all of this congruency, this kind of idea of the animal sacrifice rejection. And so Wes and Aaron had apparently butted a little bit of heads on these back and forths and said, hey, let's do a debate. Wes didn't want to do a one-on-one debate with Aaron, just straight up. That's what happened. So Aaron reached out to me and said, hey, Wes is bringing Stephen Boyce on, and they want to do a 2-on-2. Would you be interested in doing it with me? And I was like, well, if I'm being honest, dude, I'm a filmmaker, really, is what I am, and a gospel musician in my past. Now, I'm obsessed with researching this material, but I've seen how you are, Derek. You're so humble. You're probably just as smart and read as many of the scholars out there, but you'll never claim like, hey, I'm a scholar. Hey, and I'm the same way. Like, if I'm really faced up against this, I'm like, I don't know if my credibility's there. And he's like, hey, man, Aaron's like, dude, I'm not worried about that. Cause I said, have Tabor join you, so, and he's like, no, I want you to join. So I said, all right, let's do it. And so we did it. And to your point, the debate was really centered around the discrepancy between what someone like a Dr. James Tabor and others posit as the real roots of the Jesus movement or early Christianity. That isn't so much Paulianity or Pauline theology. It's earlier. It's got roots in the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Didache, this Hebrew Gospel of Matthew, some of this, but it's really a follow-on of the Abrahamic way, which is now getting to your point that there is our ultimate argument, really, that we started the debate with, Aaron started it, is that we don't believe the Bible is univocal, that there's competing narratives going on. And Dr. Tabor elicits this really great with a phrase he's coined called the blue thread. And he says, obviously there's a red thread through the Bible of violence and bloodshed and all of this, right? But equally, if not more powerful, if you look, there's a blue thread that starts in a peaceful garden and ends in a peaceful utopian kingdom of heaven. And all throughout, that vision is competing to try to overcome man's folly. The prophets are trying to bring everybody back to that vision, right? So that's what we posited. We used in the debate some slides to show the Dead Sea Scroll connection. That was one of our main kind of hinge points to our argument, was to show that throughout the Dead Sea Scrolls that they have self-designations for the community that's writing these scrolls as the congregation of the Ebionim, which is Hebrew for the poor. And the reason why we landed on that argument is because often people will say when we present material like we did in Christspiracy, the gospel of the Ebionites, right? That shows Jesus 100% anti-sacrifice. He says, quoted in this gospel, which is recorded by Epiphanius, who's a hostile witness, but we can pretty well trust he's quoting this accurately to try to debunk it. He's saying that Jesus in this gospel, which is supposedly earlier than the Greek Matthew, says, I came to abolish sacrifices. Unless you cease sacrificing, wrath will not cease from you. And then he specifically rejects the Passover lamb. He says, I have no desire to eat the flesh of this lamb with you. Now, when we will present this, often people will say, well, the Ebionites are later heretics. They just are a group. They were founded by some guy named Ebion. But they don't realize that that's crabby Epiphanius, this later Orthodox father whose whole mission is he's hired to be a heresiologist to take down everyone who doesn't believe the way of the emerging Orthodoxy. And he's reading older materials like Justin Martyr and this and that, and he sees the word Ebion and he thinks it's a person's name. But when they were writing it, they knew this was Hebrew for the poor, just like the Gospels tell Paul, right, to remember the poor. James says, remember the poor. Blessed are the poor. So we wanted to go even earlier, show that in the Dead Sea Scrolls, there's evidence of a designation, not the only designation, but a designation of the Ebionim in the Dead Sea Scrolls. We presented all this material. I don't know if you watched the debate. It was a 5-hour barn burner.
I didn't watch the whole thing, but I definitely watched a good portion of it.
I commend anyone who did, but the last thing I'll say is, it was a fun time. It was good to have the conversation, the moderation. Some of the things were challenging, but what I feel and what Aaron feels is that our core argument in what we presented with the evidence from the Dead Sea Scrolls was just completely missed. And we got pulled into all these non sequiturs, which looking back, we've learned from that, like, hey, stay on and hammer your point, because we just got pulled all these different directions. But bottom line, that's what happened.
Well, you guys are good guys too. And I'm sure, you're not trying to be overly combative. And I'm friends with Stephen Boyce. I've never got a chance to speak to Wes Huff. I don't think he wants to talk to me anyway. I've tried, but you can do what you can do. So I want to discuss this sacrificial stuff because I'm writing a script right now, exposing this to the world. Yahweh, the dying and rising God. Okay. Now, I know that this is controversial and most people would never think, like, hold on, there's no motif of him dying and rising. We don't have a story of it. We have it with Baal. We have it with Tammuz. We have it with Ishtar. We have it with Adonis. We have these various motifs of these gods dying and rising. And there was a chapter I got to as I was writing the script where I thought to myself, why is it that Jesus has to die and then come back? What if I put my Roman and Greek sources down? Because, I love to look in the Hellenistic world, especially contemporaneous to the first century. What if they're finding some of this stuff directly from Scripture? Right. So I'm looking for this thread, a different thread of a dying and rising thread that ties back to the God of the Old Testament, the deity we call Yahweh. Well, in doing so, I was trying to craft an introduction to this chapter, and I thought, man, I need a thread. Maybe I can pull on this thread. And I started thinking about, what is he trying to end? According to the story of the New Testament Gospels, it's, we're at the cusp of an apocalyptic expectation of something near ending, it looks like. The cusp of something radical is supposed to change. And I saw all these passages in the Gospels that describe violence, okay? Look, he says, from righteous Abel to Zechariah, right, whom you slaughtered. He's blaming his own people, right? He's blaming other Jewish elites and saying, look, you guys spilt the blood from Cain and Abel. We're talking from the root, from the beginning of our own origins, if you will. There's blood being spilt and it cries from the earth, okay? It's not happy. God can hear it, right? This is how the story goes. And I thought to myself, maybe this whole cyclical nature of dying and rising is necessary as part of the mythos that Jesus is putting a once for all to that cyclical agricultural expectation, using language like the wheat in the shaft. That's agricultural. The sheep and the goats. We're talking agricultural. And I thought maybe that's that thread of they're trying to actually end the violence. That's why prophets talk about you're going to turn your weapons into plowshares. You're going to get away from killing one another. And then I'm watching your documentary again. And may I give a little sneak peek of something interesting that I saw there? Is that cool?
Yeah.
That is the scholar who highlighted the Greek word, specifically behind that Greek word, the meaning is not just robber, that you would use like lestes or something like they're violent. This is a violent thing. So when Jesus enters the temple and he's turning over money changers and he's literally like, you've turned my father's house into a den of robbers. It's more than just the money. It's actually talking in a violent sense, the violence you're doing. So
Right.
I thought to myself, okay, what if you're onto something? What if there is this anti-sacrificial motif, let's stop doing animal sacrifice stuff. And this roots itself not only in animal violence, but in human violence. And they saw the connection because, look at the laws of Torah. Even the way Paul will like abuse some of the text to make his own point about, hey, you're going to pay these brethren and they're working for the gospel. Well, isn't it written? It is written. Thou shalt not muzzle an oxen while it threshes, right? Which is the idea that you don't starve the animal while it works in its original context. Paul goes, actually, this is talking about me and this is talking about us. You know what I'm saying?
Classic.
Right?
So, yeah. Well, if I can bounce off that, absolutely. And that's what I came to see. And maybe later in the podcast, if it's relevant, I can share some of my backstory of how I even got here. But a lot of that's in the film, so definitely watch it if we don't cover it today.
Yeah.
But yeah, what I see when I see the scripture is I see that there's this idea that animal slaughter and war are inextricably connected. That oftentimes it'll be animal sacrifices before battle or animal sacrifices to celebrate after battle, right? And this isn't just Jewish culture. This happened in, Greco-Roman culture and stuff as well. But within the tradition that Yeshua would have been raised in, there's this kind of Enochian idea, that has really permeated that area and a lot of the thought at that time. And I don't know your position on that with the Enochian stuff, how you feel about that.
It's influencing the New Testament, no doubt. I mean, Jude is quoted directly. Yeah.
Totally. So when you go into the Enochian tradition and you look at some of the core of it that we know is actually old, some of it isn't, right? But what we know is old is, say, like Enoch 7. It really talks about how these fallen ones, these fallen angels, their idea of their angelology and demonology is that these fallen ones instituted and taught warfare, and right alongside it, they taught to consume and kill all the birds and beasts of the field and this and that. And specifically, again, what we can talk about too in this podcast is the deliberate censorship, cover up, suppression, whether it's intentional or it's psychological, because, just like nowadays, people don't want to look at the ways that they're maybe influencing, death through their actions, whether it be food or otherwise. But something's going on where over time, over and over and over again, you see this evidence of these truths being twisted in the narrative. You just mentioned the one with Den of Thieves, right? But right there in Enoch, in the Enoch that we've had for so long, it's, I think, translated from the Greek, and it says in Enoch 7:14, that the giants, the Nephilim, right, that they began to devour one another's flesh, one after the other, and drink each other's blood. And the way that it's translated is it makes it seem like the giants are eating each other. They're cannibals, and they're teaching humans to be cannibals. But when you look at the Ge'ez, and coming from the Aramaic fragments, R.H. Charles, I believe his name is, who did the translation of that text, he translates that as they began to devour the birds and the beasts and the fish, devouring their flesh one after the other and drinking their blood. So this idea of it's a verse about cannibalism is almost a weird obfuscation of maybe a deeper tradition connected to the Aramaic, which is that these beings taught all of this bloodshed in all forms, whether it's killing the guardians of Eden, the animals, right, that are created before humankind, that probably in more shamanic Hebraic thought would have been like totem animals or spirit animals. There would have been a different kind of connection to them, but no, that's severed and they become tools. Dominion means, not stewardship. It means domination, and we can use them for our benefit, right? And then as we show in Christspiracy, from a scriptural perspective and from an anthropological perspective, top writers like, what's his name? Jared Diamond, who wrote Germs, Guns, and Steel, right? Nobel Prize winning book, I think, or Pulitzer Prize winning book. He showed anthropologically that that break of animal domestication is what severed like this tie that humans had to pre-indigenous ways of revering animals in a certain way.
Right.
And now they can breed them, they can exploit them, they can kill them, whatever. Now, once that happens, because animal husbandry and animal domestication and livestock rearing is so resource intensive, you know, I don't know if you've ever seen a goat in someone's backyard, but it'll destroy a backyard. They eat everything.
Yeah.
They drink up all the water, the cows, you know, all of them. So when these tribal societies started hurting animals, they used up all their resources really fast. And now I have to go get the resources of my neighboring tribe. Well, if you've already subjugated, done violence on animals and all this, it makes it that much easier to go do warfare on your fellow man. And so anthropologically, again, that's how Germs, Guns, and Steel, Yuval Noah Harari talks about this in Sapiens and Homo Deus, that there's this idea that domestication is linked directly to war and violence. And then the worst, slavery, that once the violence happens, you're used to enslaving the animals, which you used to have a lot more respect for. So when all the, you know, males from the neighboring tribe are killed after you've stolen their land, the women and children are left over, and they're documented as the first, you know, human chattel or whatever. So one feeds the other, and then you get the economic factor involved. You know, the first word for money, capital, pecuniary, all of these money terms are all linked to livestock, the stock market.
Dude, there's so much stuff you're saying that makes me think of, like, there's so many scholars too that I've heard over the years that are echoing some of the stuff that actually makes your point. For example, this idea of slavery is a problem for Christianity, right? There's a book that was written by a scholar. I cannot remember if it's Jennifer. It's not Jennifer Glancy, but it's Jennifer something. She wrote a really wonderful book about slavery, and she highlighted that in the Gospels, one of the parables even has Jesus use slavery as an example, like as if, like, you know, the slave owner comes home, he doesn't. I think it's Luke, but it could be a later gospel. But either way, it gives this implication, like he uses a parable. Like if you're the slave master, you're not going to come home, first serve your slave, and then, you know, do what you do. No, your slave serves you, and then it was some example. Can't remember the parable off the top of my head, but in the book, she documents the source from the Qumran sect and highlighted that there was a group among them. Now, remember, they were all, nobody's monolithic. The New Testament's not monolithic. This material, there are groups within it. There are sects. They said that owning a human, this way back then, so we always want to look for ancient sources that were anti-slavery. Go back and check this book out. She points out that they were saying that it's a crime against humanity to own any other human. They were against the system of the day. Well, sounds kind of like Jesus bucking against the actual temple system here with the sacrifices. But then to add to that, if we're going back, you brought up Enoch, because Enoch's working off of Genesis. It seems, scholarship seems to be going that way. I'm going to share my screen and just show one interesting verse. Why did the flood come? Right? Now, I believe this is mythology, but nonetheless, it's still interesting to see. Humans have seen this for a long time. The earth was corrupt in God's sight and was full of violence. Violence is the problem. From the root of the first cataclysm, violence. Jesus constantly in the New Testament, on the cusp of a new cataclysm, a new apocalypse is on the horizon, and he's saying, you're guilty of the blood. You're slaughtering the people. You're killing the innocent. You're taking from the poor. You're hurting the widows. You're not living true religion, as the book, you know, James might say in his book of what true religion is. And I'm thinking to myself, damn, there's a thread. There's some type of thread. But you tie it into animals, which is fascinating. So,
well, here's a great example. I'm glad you pulled up that verse. Can you pull that back up really quick? Is it still fresh?
Yep.
So it says violence in the verse below, in corruption. Yeah. Yep. Right. In the earth had become full of violence and corruption. So that word corruption or corrupted is shakath, the Hebrew shakath. Now, this is something I learned from Dr. Tabor, is if you remember in the Isaiah vision, of the prophetic kingdom of heaven, Isaiah 11, it says, they shall not hurt, violence, or destroy on my holy mountain in this kingdom vision. You know, the wolf will lay with the lamb.
Yeah.
Kingdom, right? That word shakath is underneath destroy there as well. They shall not hurt or destroy. Well, what Dr. Tabor pointed out to me is that in Hebrew, there's a root connection between the word shakath and the word shoket and shakita, which is the priest who slaughters the animal and the process of slitting the throat of the animal. Shoket, shakita, shakath. So in a way, he posited that there is this connection. That word has a deeper meaning in literally ritual animal slaughter or just animal slaughter. So it's almost like violence and corruption in a way is showing human and animal violence as a core piece. And that's why I think, as we know, Genesis 6 is much more vague than Enoch's version.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
But
Enoch is building directly off, right?
Right. And so now you have Enoch getting more explicit and saying, hey, literally warfare, human violence upon other humans is instituted by Azazel and whatnot, the fallen angels. But they also began to devour everything, all of the animals, their flesh, and drinking the blood. And in some senses, I think it's arguable. I believe the Clementine literature points to this, that maybe the earliest Hebrew Christians saw the fall of man more connected to this idea of the fallen angels rather than Eve with the fruit, etc. Uh-oh, did I lose you? I can't tell if it's me that's frozen or you. All right. Well, it looks like it's just me on Derek's channel now. I'm seeing if he's coming back. So in the meantime, let's see if I can look at the chat here and find a way to buy some time for Derek to get sorted out over there. Let's see. Where are we at? Jesus is coming soon. Keep looking up. That's the freshest comment I have on my side. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of people who, and I'm one of them in my past growing up in evangelical Christianity, that because of the excitement around end times eschatology, think that this red heifer sacrifice is a positive thing. And I recently, for everyone who isn't aware, if you go to Christspiracy's Instagram right now, that's where we're getting a lot of traffic and traction on this video I made about this recent red heifer burning. And I've seen so many Christians posting this video as a positive, when in the video itself, it's kind of clearly implied that it's a little bit scary and a negative. So yeah, I'm curious for anyone who sees this as a positive to maybe drop in the chat why you think so, because from Christian eschatology, the slaughter of the red heifer is what leads to the foundation of the temple, the third temple, which is a part of ushering in the Antichrist. So I'm not really sure how that lines up as a positive thing. I do know that it in some way means Jesus is coming back to, save the world. But are we sure that that's the only path to get there? Do we have to choose all of the slaughter and bloodshed and a temple? I think something that we'll talk about on this as well is that not only was Jesus and the Nazarene movement and the prophets all the way back deep into the Hebrew Bible, that they were really anti temple in kingship as well. They believed in a tabernacle. They believed in a place of worship and meditation. And, that's what Jesus is calling to, I think, when he's quoting Isaiah and saying, this is meant to be a house of prayer for all nations. But I don't think that from what we see with the Essene movement, loose term there, but the Essenes sects, such as the Nazarenes, the Ebionim, etc., they really had, along with the prophets all the way back through Hosea, Jeremiah, Zephaniah, Micah, more and more, they seem to point in the direction that, God doesn't really want a temple, this massive thing erected by the, Herodian Roman Empire. So anyhow, I'm trying to figure out okay. Derek's on his way back. He says his power went out. He's rebooting, but I'm going to keep going while he's working his way in. So let's see, what else can we talk about? Well, one thing that I can share too, while I'm, here, I'm sure Derek would have brought this up anyways, but I'm speaking more to his audience here, that a little bit more about Christspiracy. So Christspiracy is a film that I worked on for about the last almost 8 years now with my co-director, Kip Anderson. He's made the films Cowspiracy, What the Health, and then produced Seaspiracy, all of which are on Netflix, all of which investigate the animal agriculture industry from the angles of environment, health, and the oceans. And we met in 2016. Here comes Derek.
Dude, I just had the most killer lightning storm just come here in Florida. And it's gotta be Azazel, man. Once you brought in one Enoch, I know he's working overtime. Look, I am so sorry. I'm trying to reboot the computer. Continue, man. I don't mean to interrupt. I'm learning.
No, it's okay. The storm deities showed up.
Baal Hadad is trying to fight me right now.
Well, I was just sharing a little bit of the backstory on Christspiracy just to fill a little time. I can just wrap that up and we can keep going until you're.
Yeah. I know a little bit about it anyway, so you don't. I know a little, so they probably don't.
So so where I was leaving off was that I met my co-director Kip in 2016, and at that point in my life, I was born and raised Southern Baptist in the Bible Belt in Augusta, Georgia, actually where the first Southern Baptist church was ever founded. It's right down the street from my mom's house, actually. So I was deep in Southern Baptist tradition. And then by the time I was a teenager, I got really into music and gospel music and playing music for the church. And then eventually that turned into a career and brought me out to Los Angeles, where I was playing in mega churches and doing that whole thing, and also playing in some secular rock bands as well, but with like a Christian bent to them, kind of like the U2 thing. And so while I was in Los Angeles and touring was when I had a lot of extra time on my hands to start studying. And I had been on this journey since I was about 18 years old, doing the Daniel fast every year, which in the Protestant circles is kind of like the best thing that we have comparable to Lent because we just don't have anything like that. And so Rick Warren, who wrote A Purpose-Driven Life, and Jensen Franklin and all these big pastors started really pushing the idea of churches doing Daniel fasts to, draw closer to God and have a time where you reset every year. And they even made Purpose-Driven Life guy Rick Warren made the Daniel plan, which we cover in our film. And it's a time where 10 to 21 days, just like the prophet Daniel in the book of Daniel, you eliminate animal products from your diet. You just go back to vegetables, bread, grains, these kinds of things, and water, because it says in Daniel that when he was enslaved to Babylon under King Nebuchadnezzar, that he refused the king's food. That was first step of like resistance.
Son, do you want to know what the truth is? After this, there's no turning back. You take the blue pill and you wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill and you stay in Wonderland. And I show you just how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth. Nothing more.
I don't know what happened, ladies and gentlemen. This is leading up to Cameron.